All right, everyone, the red light is on and we're recording. This is Mark back for another episode of the Veteran Semi-Professional. So this is an interview episode where I'm interviewing a veteran about their life and career after the military, all in an effort to show you what options are out there, help you figure out, what do you do once you can put your hands back in your pockets, grow your hair out, and start wearing these things called civilian clothes. Okay, this is the show for you. Talk about, hopefully we can highlight some bumps in the road that other people went through, and maybe you can keep an eye out for those potholes, and also just provide you with tools, tactics, and frameworks to help you make good decisions about your post-military life and help you lead the type of life that you want to live. Okay. So I'm really, really excited for today's guest. I think I first found out about Josh's story. It was actually it was a Google print ad in a magazine, because I'm so old and I read in paper magazines. And then I saw his story again on a commercial for YouTube. And so Josh has got a really awesome story, and I'm excited to dig into it with you all. So Josh, if you take a minute and introduce yourself to everyone on the show, I'd appreciate it, man.
Yeah. So thanks for having me on here. This is really cool. My name is Josh Carroll. I served in the military served in the U.S. Army National Guard for about 9.5 years as a light infantryman. That was from 2005 to 2014. Did 3 tours in Iraq, and then transitioned out and did some things.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely get into the did some things parts here. So first, to start off, what was your personal transition from the military like? And you kind of had, I'm sure you probably kind of had like a 2-part of that, of, being in the Guard and, coming back from deployment and demobilizing and, going back into civilian life. And then, finally your official exit from the military. Can you kind of talk about the good, bad, and the ugly in there? Anything you want to share?
Yeah. So the transition, like I said, for Guard, it's interesting because you'll go on deployment, you come home, and then you kind of are thrown back into the civilian world. So I had practice, 3 times over with that, where we go overseas, Iraq, war, come home. All right, go back to your regular job. So I feel like that was kind of a, practice runs for fully transitioning out, but it still doesn't really compare. And maybe that's unique to my situation because I deployed 3 times pretty close together. Mm-hmm. So I was pretty consistently just going overseas, coming home. I was home for a few months and then I'd have to ramp back up. So I was never really home.
Right.
So the last time when I got out, I'd say I still remember the moment that I ETS'd. I was cleaning my apartment in the middle of like 2 a.m. And I looked at the clock and I was like, oh man, it's the day after I'm no longer in anymore. Wow, it's over. And that was it, right? I'm just bring my gear into the armory, turn it all in, and out you go. And so that was kind of like the first phase of getting out, where it was just very quiet. It was just me in the middle of the night. And then over the following weeks, it kind of like you get into this feeling like you don't really have a mission anymore. You don't really have an objective. So when I was deploying continuously, it was always the next deployment, next deployment. And now all of a sudden it was just nothing.
Yeah.
Your life. And so that was kind of jarring. So luckily for me at that point, I was doing school stuff, but even that, I just kind of had this emptiness that appeared, where you don't have drill. You don't have to train for the next PT test. You don't have to go to the range. It's just nothing. So
yeah,
that was kind of my transition.
That nothing can be terrifying sometimes. I'm remembering coming back from a deployment and, working 7 days a week, 18 hours a day for 6 months. And then coming home and you're like, okay, we want to get you some time back. We're going to give you a half day for, a couple of weeks or whatever. And, getting home at noon and sitting down and be like, what the hell do I do right now? What I have all this free time. What am I, I don't know. It can be terrifying and debilitating sometimes, just to have that, not have that thing that you're driving at anymore. It can be, I say it to say that that feeling, totally normal. And a lot of people go through it.
Yeah, it was, I think that was, I guess, my transition moment, I guess you could say. It was just that realization of, well, what now? Army spent good time and money teaching me and telling me to do stuff, and now they're just gone. So
you had started school somewhere in the process where you're still in the Guard, is that correct?
Yeah. So I have, again, because of the deployments, I started trying to go to college around 2008, 2009 after my first deployment. And then I got mobilized again in the middle of my semester.
Right.
And so that went away. And then from basically 2009 until 2012, it was just overseas, back home, I stayed full-time guard. So I was just full-time Army for like the in-between period. So no time for school. And then we got mobilized again. And so when I came back in 2011, I think, from Iraq, we were part of the final pullout. I just went full into school at that moment, around in 2012, I believe. It's been a while now.
And what were you studying at that time?
So when I jumped in 2009, it was just an associate's degree, general studies. I wasn't really sure. I had ideas of maybe law, history, stuff like that. Something that I felt would be, easy to achieve given my previous education shortcomings, I'm sure we'll get into. And so, yeah, initially it was just a general studies degree in 2009. Then when I came back, I kind of continued that, but I started moving more towards like science with a general study, with a associate's degree in science and also general studies. You can complete both. With the idea of, okay, I like science, maybe I should try biology. Maybe that's for me. So that was my initial schooling for college.
And were you working at this time when you first got out?
Yeah. I was working as a security guard in 2012 through 2014, I believe. I was working as a security guard.
Okay, so just to provide some context for everyone, all right. There's a great YouTube video out there about Josh and everything. And so, I was watching it before this episode right now. It's at least like the story in the show is, you were working at night and kind of rummage around through the library, and you pull a book off the shelf, and that kind of turned the tide for you a little bit. Can you talk about like what that experience was? I'm not sure if that was, over dramatized or whatever, but can you kind of talk about what happened there?
Yeah, so that took place at my job right before I was a security guard. I was working as a janitor, and I was working cleaning the library one night, and I was in the science section, and I was just, you have your lunch break, so I would usually take it in the library, and I found a book by Stephen Hawking, A Brief History of Time, and at that time, I had loved space as a kid. I loved astronomy. I loved stars and planets and stuff like that.
Right.
And so that had always been a passion. Like I remember I was in Iraq and I'd use my night vision to like look up, and sometimes just because you could see a lot of cool stuff with this.
Amazing. Yeah.
Right. Especially no lights out there.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting in the library and I pick up this book and I just start reading it every day during my lunch break. And it just kind of like reinvigorated my love for science and like my desire to want to, study more about the stars. But at the time that meant physics and math. And to me, someone who had dropped out of high school in like the 11th grade, I had only finished 10th grade geometry. And that was back in 2003. Yeah. It'd been some time since I'd even looked at a math equation. So that just seemed way out there for me. So I kind of settled on, okay, well, I like science, so I'll do a science associates. That's so later on is when I was working as a security guard. This is fast forward a little bit up to a 2012-ish. What I was trying to figure out my path, and I was in the science degree. And I remember this moment explicitly. I had just signed up for my final semester at New River Community College. Mm-hmm. That was where I was going at the time. And I was looking at my transcripts, and it had like biology and, the different stuff that I need for my associates. And I'm standing in the commons area, and it just like hits me, just kind of this out of the blue almost. It's like, I want to study physics. Like I want to study that. That's what I want to do. And that's my mission, right? I was just like, I need to do this. So I walked down to the math department, and I was like, hey, like I want to study physics. Like, this is what I need. What do I need? And they're like, well, you need to take a bunch of remedial math classes, because I was in like barely able to add and subtract fractions at the time. And they're like, you need to know calculus. And that's way up here, and I'm down here.
Right.
Okay. And so that leads into the security guard story that that's in the video, where I'm working as a security guard. And over that summer, I'm just sitting in a van guarding a street, guarding an entrance to a retirement facility. And I'm like, well, I got 12 hours to kill. There's nothing, no one's trying to invade the retirement facility. So,
right.
So I have my phone and I have YouTube, and I've got a little yellow legal pad, and I just start teaching myself calculus. I'm like, I'm just going to learn this, and I'm going to figure it out. And what I would do is I'd watch videos on calculus. I'd just find a YouTube channel that's like, hey, let's solve derivatives. And whenever the person on the video would do something that I didn't know, which at first was everything, I would pause the video and then I would search like for that operation. So it's like, hey, we expanded this polynomial. I'm like, what are those words? And so I'd Google that and find videos on that and watch people do that. And I'd go all the way back to the stuff that I recognized. And then I'd watch videos and get myself back up to the calculus part. And so over a summer and winterish, I had basically been teaching myself calculus. When I went back to school that fall and I decided to jump into physics, I remember going to the math department and I said, hey, what will it take for you to let me skip all these remedial classes that I would have had to stay an extra year and a half, I think, at New River to get all of them done. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what will it take for me to get in? And they're like, well, we don't give skips. Like, we don't give them. You have to do the remedials. And I was like, tell you what, let me show you what a derivative is. And I'll do one for you. And if you think that's enough, let me in. And to the department chair's credit, she was like, okay, fine, fair enough. Show me how to take a derivative.
Yeah.
And I did in her office. And she went, all right. And she wrote a little yellow note. And she said, bring this to the registrar and frame it because I don't ever give skips. And she let me. I walked down and I was like, hey, I'm here to get into pre-calc. And they were like, oh, you can't skip these. And I held the note out and I was like, yes, I can. And they let me skip. So I jumped into pre-calc and, the rest is the rest of the story, I guess.
Oh, that's amazing, man. I want to just backtrack real quick for everyone. If you're listening to this and you're still on active duty, or, I mean, some people still have nods, I guess, even outside of the world now, but if you ever get a chance, go sit outside and just turn your nods on and look up at the stars. I have a distinct memory of being out on a range early in my career. And, we were waiting for our turn to go shoot or something. So I'm sitting there hanging out with my squad. And like someone just kind of mentioned like, hey, just look up at the stars right now. And we all just kind of tilted our heads up and like turn our nods on and just look up at the stars. And there was just a group of like 20 infantrymen just sitting there looking up. And I think we were all just mesmerized for a full minute at least. And it was awesome. So I just highly encourage you, if you get a chance to do that. It's incredible. It really is.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, like with that, like, do you still find opportunities like that? I mean, not necessarily with nods or something anymore, but like, do you still go outside and just like look and say, holy shit, this is cool?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's my passion. Even like the current research I'm doing right now involves pulsars, and like, I'll just be outside coming home late from class and I'll just be like, yeah, I'm talking with all those stars right now. Like, I'm trying to figure out how they work. And I was lucky enough to, I was a presenter at a planetarium during my undergrad. And it's actually kind of what started all of this because it's what got me noticed.
Right.
And I would just sit in the planetarium doing homework and I just put up a star field.
Yeah.
And I'd sit in the planetarium doing homework. Yeah. Super cool.
So I want to go back to just like being in the van for 12 hours, watching YouTube videos with a yellow legal pad, man. Cause there's a lot to dig into there. Did you have like a methodology or something, like how you chose classes or videos or something to go through? Or was it just how to do calculus? Whatever first video shows up, let me start there.
Literally typed in like what is calculus, like how to do it. That's just as broad a search as I could. And yeah. Google fed me a bunch of articles. Khan Academy popped up. Got to give them a shout out. They helped me a lot.
Oh, yeah, Khan Academy is great.
Yeah, amazing. Sal Khan's done some good stuff. And then I found a YouTube videos. It would just, YouTube, you can like click the video option and it'll just give you a cascade of videos. And Patrick JMT was like, I think the first video I clicked on his channel. And it was literally like, all right, what's a derivative? And it starts pretty abstract with like something called the limit definition of a derivative. It's fancy words for basically how Isaac Newton figured out what derivatives were. And that's kind of where everyone starts in calculus, is there. And so my methodology was, again, I would watch the video and as he was doing things, I would stop and then I would be like, okay, he has like a thing that's factored, like a polynomial that's in like a specific form, and he'd change its form to something else. And I was like, how did he do that? Like, why are those two things the same? And that's a necessary step if you're learning calculus, to know algebra is the hardest part of calculus. That's just, warning for anyone out there wanting to jump in. But when he would do an algebraic operation that I just didn't know, I would stop there And then I would go find that operation. So a lot of the hard work was trying to know what it's called that he was doing.
Yeah.
So I would listen to him and he would describe it. And then I would just type in what he said and then drop the video list down and find a video that basically the thumbnail looked like what he was doing. And so I would watch that video. And if in that video, what they did didn't make sense, like, so for one is like, well, what's a quadratic? Like, what is that? Something X squared is a quadratic term.
Right.
What is a quadratic? And then you think back, oh, quadratic equation. I remember hearing something about that back in the day. And so you just kind of like work yourself down the ladder until you get to a solid base of, okay, I know what he's doing. And then practice that. So for what I would do is the problem would be on the screen that they were going to work through and I'd pause it. And again, I got 12 hours of killing a fan. So, what else am I going to do? I was doing my job, but again, it's a retirement facility. No one's trying to get in there. And so I would pause the video and I'd try and work out what he was doing. And then I'd unpause and watch and I'd grade myself. I'd like put X's like where I messed up and circle it. And then the next video I'd pause and work it again. And until I could do it without any errors, I would just stay on that topic. And then once I got that, I'd go back to the video where I'd come from and then try and do what they were doing, now knowing the operations they were doing. So it's a very streamlined, like, if you want to learn how to take a derivative, here's all the exact things you need to know to take one. So it's a very narrow path into learning math because you're just hyper focused on one thing, but it also helped get my mind back into that problem solving state.
I want to just kind of pause here and like address the audience directly for a second, because I get messages, emails, whatever, all the time from people of, Mark, how do I do this? How do I do that? Can you give me some information about XYZ or something? And oh my gosh, people, the answer is out there. Okay. Google it. It really is. Can I tell you how many times, like, in starting this podcast or the website or something or the other, I just Googled, how do I do this? Cause I don't know. Right. So like how to start a website. Like I totally was doing that way back at the beginning. How do I start a podcast? You can actually, there's so much information out there that, Josh was able to teach himself calculus sitting in a van with a legal pad and a phone. Okay. The answers are out there if you want to go search after them and chase them down. All right. And I love like catching yourself in the moment with I guess it was the dean of the math department or whatever. And saying like, no, like you know what? I think I can show you that I actually know what I'm talking about. And that I'm not just like some guy coming off the street asking for a big ask here, but I can actually show you this. We're like, we feeling like in that moment, was there like a sense of nervousness of, oh, this is like my moment to prove here?
Absolutely. I'm still nervous. I'm finishing a master's degree and I still feel like a fraud sitting in math class. Cause I didn't have the traditional, high school, you're a math savant and then you get accepted into a big university and everyone I didn't have that. So yeah, sitting in that office where I'm like, I'm putting it out there like, all right, I'm going to do a derivative for you. I'm going to show you and I'm going to tell you what it means, like kind of conceptually what a derivative is. And like that moment, like if I mess that up, like, oh, clearly you don't know. And so you can't skip. And so I guess thinking back, it was probably a bigger moment than at the time I had given it credit for. I was just doing something. I had a mission. I wanted to finish it. And that was that was in my path. So
yeah. I think most people don't realize like the moment when it's happening until they kind of reflect back on it. And I'm sure like going into, okay, like after you went to the registrar and they're like, what is this? You have a note from someone? How does this happen? And then like you made it happen.
I think they even called her. Can't remember. They might have been like, is this real?
We need to double check this because this looks a little sketchy right now. Yeah. And then I'm sure like that first day of class, I mean, you had to be feeling like some sense of like imposter syndrome of, am I really supposed to be here right now?
Absolutely. Yeah. Imposter syndrome it still exists now for me. Like I said, I'm sitting in pre-calculus, and this is actually a fun part of the story too, because it gets into more craziness that occurred afterwards. But yeah, I'm sitting in pre-calc. They wouldn't let me jump into calc, which I didn't need to. I needed to get to a level that would let me get into calculus when I transferred to Radford University. Right. Pre-calc was the path to do that. And so I'm sitting in first day one pre-calc, and professor walks in and he's, expecting students that are, everyone around me are, they're young kids. I'm in my late 20s. I've been on 3 tours. I got a bunch of 18-year-olds sitting around that have just left high school. And they're all fresh out of math classes. And I'm like, wow, I'm like definitely the weakest one in here. Like I've got the least amount of math skills in this class. And he starts writing down stuff on the board, and I cannot remember his name, and I feel bad. He was such a good professor. He basically turned around and was like, I don't know what you've heard about math, but I'm gonna teach it a little differently. And the very first thing he started with, he's like, the first thing that always trips students up are fractions. He's like, I don't know why. So let's take today and let's talk about fractions. And he just starts going over them. And I'm like, all right, I'm with him. And throughout the whole semester, he was like that, very like, I don't want you to be afraid of math. I want you to talk to me about it. Everyone struggles with different things. He's like, I still look up if I need a negative sign or not on certain stuff. And that kind of definitely helped me. But the whole time I felt like a fraud. My first test, man, I was sweating. I was like, this is it. This is the first moment where I'm going to know that I'm going to fail. And I think the department chair at the time had told me, she's like, if you fail out, don't be surprised. You're skipping like 7 levels of remedial math. So if you fail, it's on you. And I'm like, I know, I get it. And so that very first test was that first moment of, okay, you can kind of work through homework and get answers and help.
Right.
But when that test hits, that's when it's like, all right, do you know it? And I got an A. And I was like, all right, maybe I can do it. And then I finished that semester. I think I had the highest grade in the class. Beat out all the 18-year-old kids. Sorry if you're listening to this and you were in that class, but I won. So, but yeah, so that gets into the next part of the story. I'm sure we'll cover.
I definitely want to get there in a second for sure. First, I just want to ask about being in your late 20s, being in college, because I know, I have a lot of conversation with vets who are concerned about that. Of I'm going to have an age gap between most of my classmates. I'm even right now. I'm in graduate school. I'm turning 33 in a couple of days. I have like a funny story of, I don't know, about 6 months ago or something. One of my classmates, and she's a little bit on the younger side too. She's like 26. She comes up to me and she goes, Mark, I heard a rumor that you're 32. And I was like, yeah, it's true. And she was like, whoa. She's like, where were you on your 26th birthday? Because I think she's 26. And so I could like kind of do the math. And I was like, I was in Baghdad. And she was like just frozen. And she is just like super, very put together, very polished person. She's not the kind of person who gets frozen. She's just like, what? So like, what was like the kind of cultural shock there, if you will?
I've had that exact conversation, even this semester. I've had that conversation. Where they're like, I was 4 years old in 2007. What were you doing? I was like, I was riding around Mosul, but getting blown up by IEDs. Yeah. But yeah, it's quite it's interesting. You're especially older veterans that are wanting to jump back into school, which I recommend, like, do it. Just, you got the GI Bill and just do it. You're going to be closer in age to your professors a lot of times, or older than your professors in some situations than your students. Like I've had a professor that's taught me 2 different math classes. I think I'm older than him. It's something, it is jarring. There's that funny meme. I think it's Adam Sandler sitting in the class with all the little kids around him, and he's like, that is absolutely. You're gonna be sitting there your freshman year, and you're gonna be looking around at all these teenagers, and you're 27, 28 years old, and you're like, man, what is going on here? And it is such a different. But I guess as long as like you're all involved in the same subject, and you're all learning the same thing, so that when you're doing the work, it sort of dissolves. It only shows up when like I call them the kids, when these kids, the youths, the youths, they want to, they're like, oh, we're going to go party, or we're going to go do this. And I'm like, I got work. I got a wife. I got to study. Like, I'm not here to play around. Yeah. And there's an advantage, I feel, coming both from the military and being older with that. You'll see that separation there, where these are kids that are a lot of times for the first time being away from home. And you as a veteran have more than likely been away from home for years. So you've already done all that. You know what that's like. And so you got your head in your books, you're studying, you're doing what you're there to do. You're accomplishing your mission. These youths are going to parties. They're not turning their stuff in. They're asking for extensions. And not all of them are like that, but like you'll notice that difference with some of them, where some of them are very much younger and like, hey, we're going to do a thing later. And it's like, yeah, but we got homework to do. I'm going to do that. I'm paying good money, or the government's paying good money to be here. I'm going to do my job. So,
out of curiosity, like while you're at school, did you find yourself at was it like a veterans organization you connected with, or something, like with other vets in the class that you spent time with?
So in physics, for my 4 year, there was a veteran group on campus. I really didn't interact much with them. I was, as we'll cover, I was so busy with I was working, and I had a 45-minute commute every day.
Yeah.
One way. And my course load was so difficult. I didn't really partake in any group organizational stuff outside of our physics group that was studying. So there was a veteran group there. They were there to help and offer resources. There was, I think, one other veteran with me at the time. He was a Navy veteran that was in physics, but we were such a small cohort that there was like, I think I graduated, there was like 5 of us that got a physics degree that year. So yeah, there's organizations where I'm at now, University of Utah, but I just don't have the time to really.
I was just kind of curious for people out there, and just kind of while we're on the subject of undergrad too, I'll make a quick plug for my good friends over at Next Step Inbound. So great organization. It was founded by oh my gosh, I think it was 3 or 4. Excuse me if I forgot one of you guys. Former enlisted Marines who all found their way going into Ivy League programs. Okay, and I think one of them said I think he might have had like under a 1.0 or something coming out of high school. And I think all of them were kind of in that boat. Like they did not have great grades. And, when they were trying to exit out of the Marines, every counselor told them, you're not really fit for college. Like you can't do that. Go get an associate's and then go do something else or something. And I think now they're like Columbia and Princeton. And so they started Next Step Inbound basically to help other, especially junior enlisted folks get that step into top-notch universities. So just a quick plug for those guys. They're really awesome dudes.
And I can sympathize with that. Like I said, I think I had a 0.9 at one point in high school. I very much embodied, I was a light infantry grunt. And it was kind of like that whole stereotype of, oh, you're just a trigger puller, And I mean, I was for 9 years, but it doesn't mean you can't be something else. Like I had I think a 0.9 leaving high school early, getting my GED, get a physics degree now. So
yeah. So did you know going into like undergrad degree that you wanted to then go do graduate work after?
Yeah. So for me, it's always, I guess I don't want to say been short-sighted. For me, it was just like next mission complete. I didn't think too far ahead of that other than I need to finish this degree and then I need to find something that pays money so I can catch up on bills and debts because I've lived in poverty for years. And so for myself, graduate school was definitely an idea that I was thinking of. How to trying to navigate what that would be like when I finished. As the most steps I did is I just got good grades just to keep my options open.
Right.
I think I got a 3.7 when I graduated, which is pretty good. Kept my, usually for physics, like you want a 3.2 or above before they even look at you. And then, and then even then the higher, the better. But so for me, grad school was definitely something I was considering, but it was sort of after I graduate and I need to find a job. First I need something that pays the bills now so I can get a stable platform for myself. And then maybe. So, yeah.
When did people find out kind of like about your story? Right. Cause like, I'm sure, you went into school and you're just like, I spent 12 hours a night for months at a time and taught myself calculus via YouTube. Just was like, this is what I needed to do. When did someone kind of like latch onto this and be like, oh, this is kind of something like we want to share this. We want to like promote it out there.
So that I have to probably owe that to Dr. Rhett Herman, who's an astrophysicist at Radford. He was like the first when I went. So during that semester that I was taking pre-calc, I went to Radford to talk with the registrar there because I was doing Virginia has, I think a lot of states, if you're in a Virginia community college, you can transfer it to a 4-year state and it counts as your first 60 credits. And so I went to Radford to talk to the registrar, and then they sent me over to talk to Dr. Herman about the program and what would be expected if I were to get into it. And he was the first real physicist that I had talked to.
Right.
So it was like my very first sit down. And I remember talking to the registrar, and before they sent me over, they were looking at my transcripts. And I promise this is leading into why I'm noticed. They were looking at it. And they were like, oh, you took the wrong pre-calculus. And I was like, what do you mean I took the wrong pre-calculus? And she's like, your pre-calculus, you need trig. I'm like, what's trig? What are you talking about? It said I need a pre-calc. I took pre-calc. Why can't I get into the physics program? She's like, well, because your pre-calculus didn't come with trigonometry and you need trig. I'm like, great, there go my whole plans, right? I remember I was angry because I'm like, wow, all that work I did, it doesn't mean anything because I'm gonna have to retake pre-calculus again, which then adds an extra year. And I'm on the GI Bill. I only have so many dollars left.
Yeah.
And so I was furious. And so I remember I went and talked to Dr. Herman about that. And he was like, let's see if we can figure out a way to like work around this. And he was like, if you can somehow get some sort of trig knowledge, if you can somehow figure out a way to talk to the registrar into letting you, not have to take pre-calc, it would probably be the easiest thing. I said, all right. And so that was in the fall of 2013, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. And so over the winter break, I was a security guard still. And I was working at a engineering plant as a front door guy. And I remember I had 5 weeks before I was going to transfer over. And I remember I went to the math department after Dr. Herman talked to me again. And I asked the math department, I was like, look, here's my story. Here's what I've done. I'm an adult. I'm a vet. I know what I'm getting into. What would it take if I promise you I can learn trig in the next 4 to 5 weeks? Will you just let me take Calc 1 and be in the physics program? And the chair, she was like, sure. I was like, okay. And so then over those 5 weeks, I taught myself trig. I just was like, all right, this is trig. So every day I was in the office or when I'd go home after work, I would just pull up videos on my TV or on my computer and I would just learn sine, cosine, tangent. And I just go through all the stuff and very much a limited view. I didn't learn a full trig course. I learned enough, I feel like, to get me into a calculus program. And again, I'm coming into this not even knowing what trig is. I'd heard of SOHCAHTOA before from all the advanced math kids in high school, but like I didn't know what it was. And so I just kind of went in, taught myself trig, and then showed up day one Calc 1 at Radford with the professor was like, you're here, you're a calc student, time to do calculus for real. And that the reason I tell that is because like that's what sort of got me noticed, because Dr. Herman, the physics professor, was, when he found out, he's like, oh wow, he taught himself trig, like he's in calc, he's in our physics program now. Down the road, he had mentioned that to our our school paper, I guess you could say, like every university has a paper they put out. I mentioned it to one of the reporters there, and she thought it was a really cool story. And that's kind of what got me noticed, was that.
Out of curiosity, did you take like some type of trig test or something before they let you in?
Nope.
So like, how did you prove to them you knew trig?
They expected me to know it, and I had to use it. And it shows up on a calculus question on the homework or in the test, and you just have to know what to do with it. And it shows up when like physics, University Physics 1, like day 1 it's called vector decomposition, and it's sines, cosines, tangents, it's all that. And it's just, you're just expected to know it. So there was no proof that I knew it. It was just, hey, you're an adult. You said you're going to learn it.
Sink or swim.
Yeah. Show up. And I showed up. So I went in and I was like, oh, sine, I know that. And did the thing. And there were definitely hiccups. Like I didn't know that. I didn't know that depending on the triangle and the angle you were using would change which function to use. So there were definitely some moments where I was sitting with those youths in my class and I'm like, why did you use cosine here? I thought it was sine. And they would just look at me like, what? Like, why are you using sine here? It should be cosine because of this. And I'm like, oh, I have more things to learn. I'd go home and I'd like watch videos, like, what did they tell me? And so there was still very much those road bumps because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And when you go through an informal education like I do, you're going to miss things that you just didn't know to look for. And so it's an ongoing process. I still today, I still look stuff up that I might have missed because of my informal path.
Yeah. So, okay. Someone from someone from the university picks up the story, writes like a human interest story, in the Radford Times or whatever it is about, hey, there's this guy, Josh Carroll, kind of cool story. And then like, did someone else pick up on it or something? I'm just kind of curious, like how this like snowballed. Yeah.
Yeah. So at the time I was doing shows, the story initially started as I had developed a unique show for Radford's brand new planetarium. Usually when you run a planetarium, you're just putting pre-played shows in, and then you're just kind of answering questions. And the physics department, typically your students will run those. And I had decided to put together my own show just from scratch with music and animations and all kinds of cool stuff. And that was what tipped off Dr. Herman to go to our Radford, I can't remember the name, our paper, and be like, hey, you should talk to this kid. You should talk to him. And so, yeah, she wrote a piece kind of more about the show that I had made, and then a little bit about my story, kind of like, oh, you taught yourself calculus. That's cool. And then the major paper in the area in Virginia, the Run-Up Times, saw it. So I guess they have like an educational columnist that would just kind of keep his ear to the ground for different education stories at Virginia Tech, Radford, all the major universities. And that popped up, and he contacted our school and was like, hey, you kind of mentioned in passing about, like, you mentioned this guy that taught himself calculus and now he's getting a physics degree. Can I talk to him? And they said, yeah, they agreed. So he came in, he wrote a paper, he wrote an article about more detailed, my story a little more detailed, kind of focusing more on the math and the vet side of things. And then that went out, and I think I made the front page the Sunday edition. Like, I made the front page, like Virginia Tech had just won a game and I beat them out for that.
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah.
So I'm like on the front page all of a sudden. I remember I woke up, I had like tons of emails and phone calls, and they were like, yo, you're on the front page of the paper. It's like, I didn't know that. Cool. I thought it'd be like a little column in like page 12 or something.
Right.
And no, it was front page. Apparently the editor, the chief editor, loved it at Run-Up Times. And a while goes by. I'm graduated at this point, and I get an email from Google, like google.com, like not like a Gmail. And it's like this, I can't remember, it was someone from a PR team over at Google, and was like, hey, we just saw your story online, and we'd be interested in running a piece on you. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, what? This is clearly a scam, right?
Yeah.
This is not. So I hop on a Zoom call with like all these top executive people that run Google's PR team. And they're like, no, we're real. Like, we want to do a documentary about you. And I was like, sure. Yeah. So that's kind of how it picked up. It was like local paper, and then like the regional paper saw it, and then someone at Google found it, and off it went.
Super cool, man. Yeah. And like, what were you feeling, experiencing kind of during this? Cause I mean, like, you're just like, yeah, I was like, I wanted to learn physics. And so, I had some spare time and taught myself some stuff. And now I'm like, Google execs are reaching out to me to share my story and everything. Like what did that feel like?
It feels weird. For me, I mean, the way I look at it is I just did a thing. Like, I had to know calculus. So I learned calculus. Kids learn this stuff every day. People have been learning calculus for 400 years. Like it's not, to me, it wasn't anything special or unique. That was my mission. I did the thing. So when I had all this happen, it was kind of secondary. I was trying to graduate, right? I'm trying to focus on exams. Okay, someone wants to write a paper. Sure, I'll pencil you in, right? Like, yeah, I'll get you in between my homework assignments. So I'm not thinking much of it. So when the whole Google thing happened, it was kind of like, why do you want to write a study? That's why I didn't believe it. I'm like, it's math. I learned it. I'm now doing a thing. Like but I guess the perspective from outside looking in is probably more than likely different than for me. Because like when I'm embedded in it, it's my next task.
Yeah.
Learn trig, learn physics, do the things that other kids are doing. And I worked alongside other amazingly smart, talented students that were better than me at this stuff, that, they were able to fly through material like I wasn't. But I guess when you add the context of, veteran, war, dropped out of high school, it forms a nice story.
Right.
So yeah, that's more imposter syndrome, I guess, where I'm like, I just learned math and now people have documentaries about me. So
you're very humble, man. There's lots of people out there who don't even make that step of, well, I don't know calculus. I'm not gonna make the effort to make it happen. Or, I'm gonna watch that first video and all those numbers and signs and fractions are scaring me. So I'm just gonna go watch some cat memes or something right now, And I think there's a number of veterans that I've talked to in the show have kind of had that humility, like you're sharing right now, of, I just wanted to learn this thing. I just wanted to do this. I was trying to get to this place, or, start this business or get into this school or learn this skill so I could progress in my job or something. And it was just, I'm going to stay a little bit after work and watch some videos and put myself through some learning courses and just take that little bit of extra effort to set myself up to go do what it is that I want to go do. And for you, that was learning physics so you can study the stars.
Yeah, I guess when you put it that way, but I mean, I always thought I was a nuisance, because like I I'm working in an engineering plant, right?
Right.
And I would go on my rounds, and in offices there was big whiteboards where the engineers, like the actual graduated engineers, would work problems out. And I'd go in, and the whiteboard would be up there, and I'd like write a problem down, and then I'd like solve it on the whiteboard. And there's something about, I don't know what it is, writing it on a big whiteboard helps you see stuff you didn't on a piece of paper. I don't know, probably a cool phenomenon I'm not familiar with. But I'd go around and I'd fill whiteboards up around the plant with like different trig problems and calc problems. And I'm sure the engineers would come in and be like, what, who is doing this elementary crap? Like,
I mean, how many comparisons to Will Hunting have you gotten over the course of this?
Oh, I'm not solving impossible problems on chalkboards at MIT or anything. I was just writing how to find sine, cosine, and tangent. But that comparison's been made, and I'm thanks. I guess
there's worse people to compare it to. Yeah. I'm kind of curious now that your story's become a little more public or something. If other people who have taught themselves something via the internet or YouTube or something have like reached out to you and said, hey, I also kind of taught myself this thing, or, advanced my career life, whatever it is, via just information that's kind of publicly out there. Have you made connections with other people like that?
I have friends that have gone, like, that knew me while I was going through this, that have also now like tried. And I had a friend, he basically kind of saw my story and kind of was like, wow, like that's possible. And now I think he's doing engineering. And he is a veteran as well. I've got a few others that kind of jumped into school because they saw what I was doing and they were like, hey, like I can do that too. And which is, if that's what comes of all this, awesome. Like that's the point. I kind of put it out there as this, like, hey, you can absolutely, it's hard. And I feel like, especially like I avoid like the YouTube comment sections and stuff. So if people have tried to reach out that I don't know, I probably haven't seen it because I don't try and dig around in that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sure it gets quite nasty in there.
That's a smart move. Yeah. Yeah.
So I typically avoid that. The main thing is just try to get the message out. Like for myself, while you're learning it, it's like you said, it's just a thing to do. But I guess others seeing that are like, oh, that is possible. And the video, like if people watch the documentary, the 6 minutes or whatever it is, it definitely it doesn't do this on purpose, but it kind of like steams past the learning process. It's like, oh, YouTube, calculus, physicist,
right?
That easy. And I've seen a lot of people be like, oh, you're just like naturally good at math. Like I could never do that because you're just a genius for math. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I could not add and subtract fractions, like 1/2 plus 1/4. I could not do that. Like that was enough for me. And you learn what fractions, 6th grade, 5th grade. So like way back. That's where I was at skill wise. And what the video doesn't show, what the articles don't show, is the amount of hours that I put in. Like there was legitimate weeks where I would just for hours sit in front of a computer and work on problems. And I don't want people to think that, oh, if I just watch a couple of videos on YouTube, I can get a degree, or the university will just give me it. I learned way more from the school and my professors than I did from YouTube. YouTube got me there.
Right.
But the professors and their expertise guided what I needed to know. So that's my main thing to people is, hey, like there is a lot of work under the surface that you didn't see. And I'm not a math savant. I'm good at math, but that came at years now of just doing it all the time.
Yeah. Awesome story, man. Really, really, really awesome story. And so you're getting your master's right now. Is that correct? At Utah?
Yep. Master's. It's a special Master's of Science and Technology program that was designed for professionals, people that are already working in industry. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I work as an engineer for Booz Allen Hamilton right now. And so usually with STEM degrees, like STEM graduate degrees, like physics and math, they're typically full-time MS programs that require you to be there 100% of the time, and they won't take anyone part-time, which for professionals is not possible.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of business schools are part-time and at night, is because they know that people are getting degrees in business because they're working in business.
Right.
So there's not really a similar thing for sciences. So this program is now all over the US. It's called a professional master's program. They're really cool. They're set up for people that are working and want to continue their STEM education, but have to do it part-time. And so I'm getting a Master's of Science and Technology in computational science. Fancy way of saying I do math. So it's a math degree. I'm a mathematician. And so, University of Utah, that's where I'm doing it.
Awesome, man. And did you have like a particular area of focus or anything like you're studying on researching?
So it's all applied math. The area that I focused my graduate like research, sort of like my they call it a graduate project for this program, is on pulsars. Can't go into too much detail, it's still under review, but it's basically looking at how pulsars behave, like their dynamics, and trying to mathematically I guess model a certain type of behavior with respect to a piece of technology that we're trying to put together. And it's pretty cool stuff. It's taking pulsars that are out there, these like dense dead stars that are rotating super fast, and trying to figure out how to use them for future spacecraft and like different future colonies and stuff like that.
Oh wow, man. Okay. Can you give me the dumbed down version of what a pulsar is?
So a pulsar is a dead star, right?
Okay.
Stars are all big balls of gas. They're the hydrogen fusing into helium in their cores. That process is spitting out energy, and over the course of a star's life, they will burn through all of their hydrogen in their cores and use it up, and they'll expand out into red giants because they'll now start burning helium. This is a very fast paced. I know I'm breezing through a lot of stuff, but really, so stars that are much larger than our star,
right,
over their lifetimes will burn very bright, and they're very big. At the end of their lives, they get to a point where there's nothing in their cores that can burn. Their cores are basically iron, and they cannot fuse iron to make any more material. They cannot fuse it to create any more energy. So gravity wins and crushes the star down almost in an instant. And when that happens, you get the star's outer materials will collapse in, hit this point of no return, and rebound back out and explode in what we call a supernova. And then what's left, if the conditions are right, it's a very dense ball of neutrons. If you remember way back in chemistry, protons, electrons fuse, form together, make a neutron.
Right.
So you get this dense ball of something called degenerate matter, and that's a neutron star. And a lot of times when that occurs, almost all the time when that occurs, the star, that dead star is rotating fast. And that rotation and some really fancy physics terms about what's going on inside of that material causes these magnetic fields. And that generates these giant beams of radiation out of these two poles. And those beams are like a lighthouse, if you think, is whipping around. And so we see these objects as pulses of light as they wash over our sensors. So we call them pulsars. And so my research, what I've been doing is kind of working with that feature and trying to figure out a way to use that for future technology to deal with like spacecraft and going out into the solar system and stuff like that.
That's crazy, man. I love that. And also, if anyone out there, if you're getting ready to start a band and you're looking for a good band name, Degenerate Matter sounds like a pretty badass band. I'd probably go see them live. Well, awesome, man. That's super cool. Okay, just because I'm a bit of a book nerd myself, I'm sure you've got to be like a science fiction buff. Yeah. What do you like to read?
Well, when I was younger, it was a lot of the Star Wars books,
yeah,
like the expanded universe stuff. I like right now, all the books I've been reading for the last few years have been textbooks. I got a wall of them right here.
Right.
I really don't have time for any like other sci-fi stories at the moment. I love Star Trek. Obviously, it's kind of like comes in the territory.
Yeah.
So all the Star Trek shows. I'm a Next Gen is my favorite kind of person. That's that was what I grew up watching. But yeah, as far, I guess, The Expanse is one of the best series on TV.
Yeah, I just finished the first book too, and
the books are amazing.
Yeah, awesome, really awesome.
So I definitely recommend that.
Yeah, I'd heard. I don't know if this is probably just some internet Reddit rumor or something that popped up. What I had heard about The Expanse was actually, I think another network maybe had it and was going to cancel it, and Jeff Bezos was such a fan of it, he was just like, screw it, and bought it. Just so you basically continue it.
I could see that. Yeah, it's unbelievably good story.
Yeah. Such a good show. Well, Josh, this has been awesome, man. I'm so glad you get to come on and tell your story to this crowd and everything. So in a minute, I'm going to pass back over you, providing, last thoughts, words of wisdom that you want to give to, a crowd of veterans. But before I do, is a question I always ask my guests. When you think back to your time in the Army, what was the best and or worst chow hall you ever went to?
Man. So best chow hall, Air Force DFAC, Cobb Adder, down in southern Iraq. the Air Force DFAC was just
Always. Yeah.
amazing. I loved it. The Baghdad DFACs were good too. They like the ones in near the palace and stuff like those were, but I think the base when I was on the Air Force DFAC was surf and turf night, man. That was you'd end missions early to get there for that.
Yeah.
Worst DFAC. Oh man, not counting MREs in a mud hole. I don't know. Overseas, I guess, I don't know, Fort Pickett, hate to throw you under the bus. Fort Pickett was always a little off. They try, but it was, I don't know. Fort Pickett is where I did a lot of my training.
Right.
I'm sure a lot of people will be either agree or hate me for it. I don't know. Worst defect, I was sitting in the back of our MRAP trucks at the end of the Iraq deployment, eating Cliff Bars and Otis Spunkenmeyer, whatever her name is, muffins.
Oh yeah,
Because when I was there, they closed all the defects before we left. So we were like the last troops out.
Right.
And so we basically got a box of MREs and a bunch of Cliff Bars and a bunch of muffins and the honey buns. And they were like, make it last for a month. And it was like, all right. So that was pretty bad too. Yeah. I still to this day have not eaten a Cliff Bar or a Pop-Tart. I can't do it.
I totally get that. And then wash it down with a nice cold Ripit as well, man. Like, yeah.
Ripits are great. Ripits are fine. I don't know. The Army standard for staying healthy was like, all right, work out, train, and then you go on mission. It's like, here's honey buns and Ripits. And it's like, it's like, all right, sure.
Yeah. It always amazed me seeing like some, crusty first sergeant or something. I'm like, he's eating Doritos and sunflower seeds and drinking a Monster. And like, that's the only thing you see him consume. And then somehow he runs like an 11-minute 2-mile or something. And you're like, how do you function? I don't understand this.
We had people that were like lifelong committed smokers, Marlboro Reds. And they'd go out, smoke a cigarette, run a 5-minute mile, and then light up another cigarette. You're like, how?
Yeah.
I don't smoke and I try and I'm barely struggling 7 minutes, 50 seconds on that first mile.
Right.
And they're done. I'm like, what in the world? Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy stuff, man. Well, Josh, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a great talk and I'm so glad we get to share your story. So I just want to pass it back over to you for any last thoughts, words of wisdom that you want to give to, a crowd of people who maybe they're still in trying to figure out what post-military life looks like, or maybe they've gotten out the last couple of years and they're still trying to shape, put the pieces together a bit.
I guess you have the GI Bill. I mean, you're a veteran, you've got that. Even if you don't, like, to me, education is important in beyond just getting a good job. Yeah. It's such a staple for any civilization and any society to have an educated populace. And you've got this advantage that you've earned via your work to go to school and have the government say, hey, here's a degree, like here's some knowledge, or even a trade school. Like not even just a 4-year, like if you like welding or building or machine shop stuff, like go get that trade. And if you're sitting there like, oh, I'm just a dumb grunt, or, I'm just like a jarhead sitting around, smoking and joking, all that fun stuff, I could never go to school. No, you can. Again, I'm not a math savant. I'm not. I just sat myself down and made that my mission. You can do that too. And I push every veteran I know to use that GI Bill. I push everyone I know, not even veterans, just to get some sort of education. Yeah. Trade school or 4-year degree or just certificates you like coding and you just want to learn Java, like do it.
Yeah, I'll absolutely, echo and expand a little bit on there, especially for the GI Bill aspect. Cause I know the narrative in the US right now is like, you have to go get a 4-year degree. And that's the only pathway to success in life. And if you don't get a 4-year degree, then you're an absolute abysmal failure. And that is absolutely just like a crock of shit. Okay. I did it. Okay. It, turned out all right for me, but there's also plenty of ways, whether it be a trade or learning to fly. You can use the GI Bill to learn how to go be a mountain guide. You can learn how to be a cook. You can go like a top culinary school. Or even there's just a ton you can do with it. And you do not have to go do what everyone else is telling you have to go do. Find something that's gonna make you happy. Find something you're gonna be good at and pursue that. All right. There's plenty of plumbers out there who make $300K a year. Okay. All right. And there's plenty of people with college degrees who not anywhere close to that. Okay. So go do something you're going to be good at and that you're going to enjoy. All right. And there's plenty of ways you can use your GI Bill to do that. Well, Josh, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. This was absolutely awesome. Really appreciate your time. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy your weekend. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, man.